So I now get to introduce our next speaker, Laurie Burress from Lynda.com. Excuse me. She is the Director of Digital Media at Pasadena City College. She's been a professor of design there for 15 years. She is a professor of design at Pasadena City College for the last 15 years. She has a BFA and an MFA from USC. She is a professional digital storyteller and has developed a rich curriculum in digital and new media, working with companies like Warner Brothers, Disney Interactive, Industrial Light and Magic, and Apple. So please join me in welcoming Laurie.
Thank you all so much for inviting me. It's so pretty at this campus. It's just the weather, boy, and you're out of school. I heard you had graduation a week ago. I love coming to campuses right after graduation. They always look really, really good. Before I start, I just want to get a little kind of barometer of you guys. You seem like you all know each other pretty well. How many of you are actually in the classroom teaching? How many of you are academic support for teachers? And how many of you are IT support? And then the rest of you are here just for the free lunch, right? So it's been said over and over again that campuses and universities are in a bubble. When I went to USC, we were pretty sure we had a Teflon bubble from our neighborhood. But in fact, the new bubble is the internet. And what's interesting about it is if you look at this map, this is from 2007, which isn't that recent. This is where all the internet is, and the size of the bubble is the amount of internet available. And what I was struck by when I looked at this map is that it in fact mirrors where all the academic institutions are in the world. And where there is a lack of academic access to learning and education is where there's a lack of the internet. So we don't live in a bubble anymore. We actually have the ability, because of the internet, to share our learning in a lot of different ways. But I think all of us, including myself, feel like that we were hired, we had to tap dance and cook and speak and do 5,000 things and 3,000 interviews to get our jobs. We had to be subject matter expertise and all kinds of things and just to get the job. And now we're being thrown into this technology thing. And I've been in it for the last 15 years. And there's words like blended learning. And every time they say blended learning, for some reason Jamba Juice appears in my head, like it's something that happens in a blender. And I think it's a little bit fuzzy. You hear the words, you hear the big words, you hear the big ideas, even the big ideas we heard this morning. But it maybe doesn't translate into the things you do every day in a tactical and strategic way. And as for the flipped classroom, I think for most of the educators that I meet, and I have visited over 80 to 90 campuses in the last 3 years for Lynda.com, working with campuses on integrating technology, it's a vertical flip. You feel like your office just got turned upside down. It's not easy to deal with all of the things you're required to do as a teacher and in part of your institutional planning, if you have that here at Cal State Northridge, to deal with it. And then they say cloud, and you look outside, and they mean no, cloud apps. So what do we do in this new environment? If this is our flipped world, this is the world we're going to live with. It's strangely familiar, but strangely chaotic. And I'm going to stop and just give one little short story. I have been feeding my children for the past 20 years. Now that they're at college, thank God they're feeding them. And I got sick of making the same macaroni and cheese recipe every single night. So I got out my Bon Appetit magazine and I made this new fancy schmancy macaroni and cheese. And I fed it to the family, and of course we rushed through the meal like in 15 minutes or less for the 3 hours it took to make this gourmet mac and cheese. And as I went to clean up my son's area, I saw that on a napkin he wrote, "Change is bad." And I mention that because I think whenever anything is new and different, the first reaction is change is bad. But believe it or not, I was talking to people at Facebook who do developing there, and they said the day they change something, they get literally hundreds of thousands of this is bad. And within 48 hours, they stop. People get used to it. They adjust. They make an adjustment. One of the things about us being the great Darwinian creatures we are is that we're highly adaptable. So that's our line of hope today. But for the student, I think there is a flip for them too. This is a drawing by one of my students. And this is a classroom at PCC. And I found an exact, absolutely same duplicate photograph of our classroom in 1920. The only difference being that these are from mica-topped desks as opposed to wooden top desks. This classroom has not changed the way it looked in almost 100 years. So imagine this bright young student who's 19 years old coming to Pasadena City College, and this is the first thing he sees. But you know what he's thinking about? This is where I live. This is my internet world. These are the things that I'm doing outside of this classroom. And for me in that connected space, I'm thinking that I'm connected to all kinds of information, all kinds of people, all kinds of experiences, all kinds of news every single second of the day. And it's 360, it's 24/7, it's happening to me all the time. And are we meeting that landscape? Because they're eyes on this future. And this future is full of not just .coms, but .com giants. There is the Googles, there's the Facebooks, there are all of the Apples, there are all those companies, and they'll be working for them. My son is working for a .com company. He just got out of Princeton, and 1/3 of his friends are working for a company that is primarily on the internet. One of my classic sayings now is, the new storefront is the internet. People aren't building buildings, they're building places to go and do business and share information. So where do I fit in this landscape? And where do my students fit in? So I'm going to do a little test. I like to show this graphic. It's not mine. And it's a wonderful graphic. And what I always do, I do this with my students the first week of class, and I do it with teachers when I'm working with teachers. So you can see there's an A, B, C, D. And without discussing with your neighbors, try to decide where you belong. If you're an A, a B, a C, or a D. So how many of you are A's? How many of you are C's? B's? How many of you are in the B quadrant? And how many of you are in the D quadrant? Now what happens most of the time is most faculty end up being in this quadrant. These are the tools that they use personally. They use Bank of America Online, they use Flickr and PayPal and all of those things. And the students invariably are over this area, which is more of what I call edutainment. And what we have to do, what the critical thing I see here to make these two worlds meet, that classroom world and that world of internet, is to start teaching the students how to take the tools that they use out for edutainment and translate them into academic tools, and to academic rigor, and to research. And move that change so that we're not at polar opposites on this, but that we're moving through these tools and making selection in the tools. So if we're going to learn better, it's not learning better, but instead it should be learning differently. So I try not to use the word good or better or best anymore. My shrink told me not to. I'll never achieve it. And one of the things I'm going for now is going from good to great to amazing. So I'm going to share some experiences how I've always been a good teacher because I was a good student. And I thought my job when I first started teaching was to chew up that subject matter and pour it down those baby student throats, and that they were just little containers there for all the information that I was giving them. But I've moved because of technology into an idea of what it means to be an amazing teacher. And it's really changed the way I teach and the way I work with students. So I want to take you along with me today and sort of rethink and redefine and talk about some experiments that I've been running and I continue to do and change all the time. So one of the things that I did is I let go of the syllabus. Now I have to turn in a syllabus for Pasadena City College. It's required by the state of California. It probably is here at Northridge as well. But what I did is I didn't pass out the syllabus the first day of class. I sat down to them and I asked two questions. And the first question is, why are you trying to take this course? And I got the typical answers, which is it's transfer, it's required, you have to have it for my job, blah, 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 blah. I said, that's why you're taking it. What would you expect at the end of 15 weeks to know in this class? What is the one thing that if you don't walk out knowing that, you'll fail? This is a fail of a class, because this is not what I thought I was getting. Absolute silence for 5 minutes. And I like to talk. I'm not from the Midwest. I like to fill in the blanks. So I just sat there and I sat there. And finally they started talking. And there was things like, you know what, Laurie? I've taken 3 web design classes, and I've never walked out with a web design on a server outside of the school server. I would like to walk out of here with a web design site that's hosted. I don't know anything about getting a domain name or doing any of that. All the hands popped up. I go, oh, Shazam, I wasn't going to do that. It's so hard to get everybody outside. He said, well, if you want to do that, we're going to spend 2 weeks less on interface design. I said, it doesn't matter to us. So we negotiated. Now, there are a couple times I am, as Malcolm Gladwell will say, the one with the 10,000 hours of expertise. And I can veto anything in a class because of that 10,000 hours. So if someone can beat me on the 10,000 hours, they have the right of veto as well. But as you can see, that we started doing an agreement, and that was what we'd all agreed upon would be the course content. So that input created that list of topics and styles, their input and my input, the agreement going forward, the understanding of why I was including certain things, why I wouldn't let go of certain things. And I went through this whole thing about how some of this was going to have to be done outside of class, that there would be this on-your-own learning component, that it couldn't be all done in 15 weeks if they wanted to have a self-hosted website, and what it would take and what the trade-offs would be. So one of the things that we did, excuse me, I didn't mean to go ahead on that slide, is I do a digital tool survey, and I find out what my lowest common denominator is. And my lowest common denominator for the past 2 semesters at Pasadena City College has been a smartphone. That everybody in the room has access to a smartphone. Every single person. And every single person in that class has access to a camera, therefore, internet, and a video. Now that has happened unanimously for 1 year at a public institution where there are numbers of at-risk students attending. So that common denominator becomes our technology source. That is our digital lab right there. And knowing that, I ask all the phones to come on top. That is your tool for school then. Bring that up. It's right up there with the pencils, the pens, and the notebook. Put it on top because I expect to see it here every day. So one of the things that I do, one of the first samples I give is first day of class in like a color theory class, I'll say, I want you to do this assignment, and you'll need to know what primary or secondary colors are, and here's what you have to do to do the assignment. They go, you're not explaining what primary and secondary. I said, I'm not. They go, well, how are we supposed to do this? I said, you've got all the tools you need right in front of you. And so all of a sudden they go, you're going to let us use our phone, to go look up what the word primary and secondary colors are? And pretty soon the whole room is chatting and talking and saying this is the website, and I've moved back, and I've moved back. And then they're all helping each other to figure out how to do this problem, and we're solving this problem, and they walk out of their day one with a problem solved using the tools they have at hand, because I'm going to teach them how to do learning on their own. So another thing that I instituted was challenges. I've been doing a lot of research on innovation, because businesses are asking me all the time saying, you bring really smart kids out of these schools, Laurie, but they're not innovative. And I said, what do you mean by that? Well, they know how to study, they know how to take tests, they're really good at being right, they know how to get the right scores on everything, but I solve problems here every day, and I need people who can make a fail. And I was thinking, my own 2 kids, when I said to them, will you fail in school? If you don't know an answer, Willie, at Princeton, Katie, if you don't know an answer at Northwestern, will you raise your hand? And my son said, hell no, I'm with the smartest people in the world at Princeton, I'm not gonna let anyone know I don't know something. And my daughter said, I will never raise my hand. And I said, what do you mean you'll never raise your hand? She said, I'm not going to be one of those, she calls them douchebags at the back of the class, who's always got to be the first one up, raising their hand. I'm not going to sit there for 45 minutes hoping that teacher calls on me. They've got a roster. If they want to have different voices, look down at that roster and call some new names. I'm not doing that. She says, I'm tired of being a woman who doesn't push through the door first and doesn't get seen. Now that's a woman's point of view. So this is an interesting idea that the classroom itself is a social environment that does not allow for failure because peer pressure is so important. So I thought, what can I do to get them to do something like this? So I started things called challenges. And challenges only have 2 grades. There's an A or there's an F. If you do not experiment, if you do not fail, fix it, or get feedback, you fail. If you do not create and invent and innovate, you fail. If you do any of those things, regardless of how bad your solution might be, or how hokey it might be, you get an A. I will tell you, it is the great motivator. So this is one of the projects I gave. I gave my kids a template to look at how tone works to create space. That with 2D tools, we can fake people into thinking they see 3D. And I gave them a photograph that I'd Xeroxed, and I gave them a template, and I said, go home this week with your pencils and make it look like that photograph. I did no examples, no demos. So when we came back, I gave them all 3 dots, and everybody in the class, again, I moved back. They all put the 3 dots all over the room, and guess what? Out of 22 students, as you can see, there are 3 that are predominant winners. I did no grading. I did no dot choosing. So I called the 3 up, and instead of spending 2 hours going one by one by one through each of the projects and saying this is good, this is bad, this is better, and no one talking but me and the douchebag, I brought the 3 people up and I did an Oprah thing. And I said to the 3 students, your 3 have been chosen overwhelmingly by the entire class as the best examples of this. We want to know what your strategy and process for being such a winner was. Well, the first kid had actually, he says, I've been drawing since I was 6, and my parents put me into art classes on the weekends. I did Saturday High, blah, 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 blah. I said, that's interesting. So you had some background experience in the visual arts. He said, yeah. I said, where did you do it? He says, I have a desk set up and a lamp. I could hear mumblings already in the back room. He has a desk and a lamp. Duh. Then I said, did you do it in one sitting or did you do it over time? He says, I did it in one sitting. I felt fairly comfortable. And when I got in the flow, I was able to be very focused and finish it. I could really look at it. I really was into the project and nothing else. Second girl, I said, what did you do? She said, it took me 3 days. I said, what do you mean it took you 3 days? She said, I commandeered the dining room table. I said to my mom, we're going to eat in front of the TV set. I'm using the dining room table. I'm putting this project up. She says, I'm new to this. I wanted it to be right. I knew this was an A or an F assignment. And I sat down and I would work, and then I would sort of overcorrect myself and get nervous and get fatigued. So I would go take the dog on a walk, or I'd go take my iPod, or I'd go do off, or I'd go watch an episode of Arrested Development on Netflix. I would just take a break, and then I'd come back. And for me, she says, I found that at this point, remember, I just came out of high school. 45 minutes was all I could do and really pay attention. Third person came up and said, I did it in my bedroom, but I got the butcher block carving thing from the kitchen. I pulled it out and I put it on the bed, and I did it there, and I got a clip-on lamp, and I set up my own drafting table in my bedroom. And I did it listening to music the entire time, and I would listen to music, work on it, step back, look at it, listen to music, step back. So all of a sudden, this kid at the back of the room said, I spent 45 minutes on it without a light, and I didn't even try to do it. I just did it as fast as I can on Sunday night. No wonder I'm not one of those people. Now, this is the conversation, and notice you don't hear my voice in the conversation at all. So what is happening here is it becomes really clear that with strategies, with perseverance, with the right tool set, and with the right idea about what your learning style and your focus and attention can be in a project, you can manage that to be successful. We do this all the time the first 5 weeks of class. It only takes 45 minutes, and it's really, really easy to do. And guess what? It's not the Laurie show, it's the class show. It becomes all about those successful people. And it's not the same people that get chosen every time for every project. So this peer evaluation, this idea of process and strategy. So I go up to the 3 winners afterwards. I always take their picture by the artwork, and I say to them, I'm showing examples. Do you see how it's totally different? That people are getting up and having conversations and moving in the room and clustering around the work and working and looking over each other's shoulder. It changes everything when there's someone besides me who's a trusted person in the classroom, and that I can go to that person and get advice, and I learn about them. It's like peeling an onion. They're not just the girl with the blonde ponytail. It's the girl who knew that if she couldn't do it right, she should get up and walk the dog. They start understanding how they all learn. The next thing I do is I do a lot of collaborative team building, but I don't send them out to do it alone because they don't know how to do it. The last time they did team building was when they were in the sandbox in kindergarten, and they were very good at it and building blocks. But there were rules, and as you know, in kindergarten, there is no such thing as getting harmed. It's all set up so that you can't. So sending people out to do team building that have 15-hour-week jobs, that have 2 children to take care of, who are also taking 18 units, is not a very good strategy for success if you are trying to do a team project, teachers. I will dress you down for that. They don't know how to do it. My optimum number for a team project is 3. And on the first day of class, we do a team project, and we do team projects that I actually have done in business. This one is, what is the highest thing you can build with 20 pieces of spaghetti, 1 yard of tape, 1 yard of string, and a marshmallow? Now, I will let you know, I've run this experiment 4 times in 4 different classes, and it's also done at Caltech, and it's also done at Autodesk, and it's done up at the D School. So it's done in a lot of places, and my students know there's pressure, that it's not just Laurie being wacko and saying, let's do something with spaghetti today. Only one group succeeded in actually getting it to be more than 2 feet tall. When it was done with a group of 10 kindergartners, their average height in kindergarten was 3 to 4 feet. The average height I've gotten in college has been 1 foot to 18 inches. When it was done with architects, it was fabulous. When it was done with CEOs, they all got around 2 to 3 feet. When the CEOs did it with their exec assistant, they hit 4 feet. Vision plus strategy, and get it? Get it? When you put the right teams together. So we have a lot of talk about that, and we start working in teams on all kinds of things. So one of the days I said to them, because we do a lot of digital stuff, right? I let them use the phone's on top. I said, what about this color wheel? I said, I'd like to do something really different. I want the whole school to be aware of what's doing. So we all brought in colored t-shirts, and they grumbled, and said, you're going to make us each wear a color that's one of the colors of Johannes Itten's color wheel? And I said, yes. Not only that, I said, we are going to make a human color wheel out in the quad. And so-and-so can be a, and all of a sudden, again, step back. I take photography, I have the camera, I brought my DSLR today. You know what? I've worked on commercials. Would you just move that foot a little to the right? There's always the bossy girl who wants to be the producer. There's always the creative stylist. There's always the photographer. And pretty soon we had these pictures. About 50 people started coming out. It got in the school newspaper. The dean came out and took a picture of it and sent it out to the art associates. And I will tell you, it is not the greatest piece of artwork, but there's no one in that class that doesn't remember that day. And there's no one in that class that didn't walk across campus that day and have someone say, hey, aren't you the group, you're wearing that shirt, you were in the, they had this recognition for doing something, this feedback outside that was because they'd self-generated a project. So one of the things that I've learned, because I just finished taking a MOOC online at Stanford, is that you cannot be clear enough in your assignments. That when you're online, one of the differences between going into, if I went into your houses here, this is a very traditional neighborhood, Northridge, and when if I walked into your front door, as I got into that foyer, I could pretty much guess, the rooms or the bedrooms, the personal stuff is far away. This might be living room, dining room, kitchen, den over there. There's a 2-story house, bedrooms upstairs. I would almost know the floor plan without even walking into the house. But when you go to the internet, I'm sorry, I keep touching myself. When you go to the internet and you come to a site, even lynda.com site, one of the problems is you don't know where you are. You know you're at the front door, but you don't know, is this something that has 10 stories? Is this something that has 1 room? Am I gonna if I go here, will I never be able to come out the door again? Will this be like a bad Dan Brown novel called Inferno? What will happen to me? So on the internet, when we're giving assignments and when we're talking about the assignments we want, let's be more clear. I cannot tell you about this clarity. So one of the things I realized is I was giving these really cool assignments, but not giving any context. And as you can see, a lot of what I'm talking about here is just taking what I know and putting it into context. So now when I do an assignment, this is an example of a handout I might give out. This is for a class in web design where everybody has to create an online resume using CSS3 and HTML5. Now, it's really evil genius, an assignment on how to do topography using CSS3. But what better way, because 90% of the web is still text. So if they can't design good text and topography online, they're not going to get hired as web designers. But notice I define what the tools are. I don't say everything. How did I find these tools? I went and called up 3 companies and said, what kind of tools are you using in that environment for your entry-level people? became my tool. There was my toolbox. Then I said, I went out and got some inspiration. Jeffrey Zeldman, one of my favorite all sites, and I love topography. Then I said to the students, you have to have 5 different versions of this. They go, 5? I said, well, who ever heard of a resume coming one way? If they want ASCII text in an email, if they want a doc, a PDF, an HTML, or a LinkedIn profile, you should be at the ready to do it. And they said, well, would this really happen at a web company? I said, absolutely, this would happen at a web company. You would be asked 5 different ways that the content would have to be fit the form factor. So this is fit the form factor. And then finally, I would say, what would I say if I were in a job interview, what could I say about this project? That you learn file management, that you understand the difference between structure and presentation, that you know naming conventions, on and on and on. This is the way I give out my assignments now. And now it starts making sense because what? There's a pathway to a career here. There's an understanding. It doesn't take all the tools in the Blick Art Store to be famous. I can choose the tools that are specific to the task, and I can manage this, and I start using words like form factor and due diligence and rigor around things. So once they do that, 2 weeks before that project is due, I hand out a rubric. And as you can see with this rubric, one of the things about this rubric is I, again, don't fill it out. Everybody puts their online resume or their project. If it was a research project, it would be writing up on a screen. Everybody gets up, moves away from their desk, and they have to go, the rubric is left in front of the project, and you go to 3 other people's desks, and you sit down and fill out the rubric, and you do it anonymously, and you give the grades, and you can put comments on it. This takes, again, 20 minutes to do, to move around the room, but guess what? It gets them out of their chairs, moving around, looking at other people. And as you can see with Janice Kim's here, she got lots of feedback. Here's her 3 students' feedback, 1 week before it was due. She has 1 week to take that feedback and do something. People gave her suggestions like, one of the things I love about this is somebody reorganized some of the information and did a little wireframe on the bottom. Another student said, you know, Janice, I think it's good, but I'm used to you doing a wow factor, and I don't see it here. That is some hard stuff to take. But it's very positively given. And it's learning to give feedback in a way that's very constructive. So I'm going to take a moment to pop out and show you that online so that you can see that. Here we go. So this was Yvonne's after she fixed it all up. And as you can see, it's absolutely text. There's not one single image on it. And she did get hired 3 months after leaving my course at MoCA to work on their WordPress site. So these are the kinds of things, because she now had that conversation in the context of what she was doing connected to why she had done this and taken it to the spot. And she could talk about the process of getting feedback and improving a project and solving a problem. So how do I use other resources? I'm a big fan of open source resources. I use Wikispaces for all of my courses. And one of the reasons I use Wikispaces is because I was very disillusioned with the fact that with LMS is what happens. You do all this work, and remember, I'm very collaborative. My students bring work and research to the course, and it closes. It's not available to them. So what I do now is every one of my courses has a Wikispace. And Wikispaces has just gotten some huge funding in the education space, and they will now make a secure site. So this is very important to me at Pasadena City College. I have a number of students that are under 21, and I need it to be an HTTPS site, which means secure served site. And it does not allow people to use email, it only uses profiles. So once my students are invited to the wiki, all we see is their profile. We never ever see their personal email. This is very important to me that in no way. It also has fabulous SEO. And the students contribute and do all of their things. They're also clearly asked to develop their own pages, and we have rules for the wiki. If you see something you think is wrong, or misinformation or disinformation on the wiki, then one of the things that you have to do is send a comment to that person, and they have 24 to 48 hours to address that. Well, what this means is that there's lots of dialogue and feedback, and we're doing just what Wikipedia does. We're using our academic research and rigor skills to improve upon the learning that we're doing all together. So when they leave this course, they have not only a record of all the learning they did individually because they're each allowed to have their own wiki page, which they can use as their own. But they also have a record of their course. And what you'll see in this last project, this was a snap guide project that we did as a final project. But each week when we do things, we post the best, those AFs, those challenge products. And as you can see, it creates this reservoir of great projects, great learning, great things that we did. As you can see over the side here, we have the contrast, all of the color theory things we did, and all of the ways that we got research. And the research, if you go to it, goes to the sources, and it's all been edited and given examples. And in my classes, you have to show examples from art history, as well as show examples of contemporary use that are done in the digital space, as well as the research spaces. So this is a really important device for us, but it goes with them. One of my students came back to me and she said, you know, I'm a wedding photographer now, and I Googled my name to see how it would come up, and she says, guess what? My wiki page came up before my wedding business did. So just letting you know, but this follows them. And so then when they go out to do a job or they get ready to transfer to another school, they have this great record of how they worked in teams and as an individual to create problem solving and rigor and research. This is very important to demonstrate out in business. It allows them to have personalization and voice. I have a lot of students who will not raise their hands or talk in class, but they will post on the wiki and ask other members of the class all kinds of questions. So often, once we get going, after we get to these A and F challenges, what they'll do is they'll actually put assignment up and say, I'd like feedback in the next 24 hours. I'm at a point where I don't know what to do next. And before I even have a chance to get up there, 3 people have responded. So this is another really important thing. And finally, I'll do polling. For instance, in the web design class, nobody's made a website, so I ask them to go out and find a WordPress site. I don't tell them what a WordPress site is. And I say go to wordpress.org and wordpress.com and find 3 WordPress sites that you like, and pick one, and I want you to tell me what you like about it and what you don't like about it, and then give it a grade, just like I have to do for you. That's what I'm going to do the last week of class. I want you to do it the first week of class for me. And what's nice is they actually write 3 sentences that mean something. I love the way the photos are delicately composed to show a variety of her travel spots. It's personal, but very interesting to people who love to travel. That girl would never say that in class. She wrote that sentence. That is a wonderful sentence. That is the way we want people to write email. That is the way we want people to write summaries for an executive when you're making a project proposal. Who in this room hasn't had to convince and compel and persuade a group of people on this campus to give you money for a project that was worthwhile endeavor? This is the kind of writing that does that. This is why I like using wiki spaces, so that we use words again to share meaning. She gave it a 3 after she said those wonderful things. That's a C. They're hard graders. Another thing I went through myself, because I don't use everything, and I don't want to use everything, and I don't think I should have to use everything just because I'm a technology teacher, is I went and made a list of all the feedback, and I divided it by what you could do outside of class and what you could do inside of class well. Which one was better inside and which was a better outside. Because one of the things I wanted, what I realized with the wiki is, my students now thought of me as being available 24/7, 365. Now they thought I was ever present to them. And they thought I was just so there for them. And I was like, bingo, wow, look at me. I'm not doing an online course, and they think I'm there for them because I'm doing the wiki. So feedback for me, I do email and online wikis. I do PDF comments, I do Vimeo comments, chat, iPhone video. I'm not a big fan of the learning management. Some teachers use Skype and VoiceThread. But believe it or not, my 2 favorite are the email and the online wiki. And I personally can manage that myself and do everything else that I'm supposed to do as a teacher, a mother, a leader. You know, I can do all of those things. What I save for the classroom, though, is the face-to-face critiques, the project briefs. This is where you pitch your ideas and you get feedback. And I have them always do a written and oral presentation along with the project solution, how they got there, what the processes were, why it would be compelling, and what resources they would need to actually complete that project. And then we do brainstorming together, because I realize they don't really know how to brainstorm. They think that's just making a list of 10 things, and when you get to the number 10, you're done. And they'll put anything on that 10 thing list. So I don't know about you, what's your favorite online feedback, but most of you, even if you don't think of yourself digital, if I ask you how many hours a day you're spending on the internet, guess what? I've done this now. For the last 3 semesters, I've done that. And whether you're a digital or a non-digital person, the average is 4 to 6 hours per day on the internet, minimum. One of my students wrote 24. I'm never off. When I asked them where their cell phones were at night, all but 2 people slept with them either on the bedstand or some of them said under the pillow. And I said, why under the pillow? So my boyfriend won't get to it first. I realized that with the cell phone, this idea of the lowest common denominator lab, that I was able to reach them in a different way. So I created a Google Calendar for my class, which you can put in the wiki because the wikis like Google Calendars, and they subscribe to that. And every Sunday night, ping, they get a little thing from me on their cell phone saying, event tomorrow at 8. Bring tools. Crit. That assignment is due. All kinds of things every Sunday night. I give them a choice on this one because I'm an evil genius. Would you like to get pinged at 8 in the morning on Sunday, 12 noon, or 11 p.m.? Consensus 100% unanimous, 11 p.m. Feedback. There is no amount of too much feedback. You know that. If you're on a project, doing a dissertation, writing a book, creating a website, you're going to your go-to people. You've all got your go-to people. Don't you all have at least 2 go-to people? That person that you wouldn't submit anything to without having those 2 go-to people go to. And they're trusted resources. And you're expecting them not only to give you the right answer, but to give you the honest, authentic answer. So I realized that feedback was really, really important to me. So one of the things I'll do is do a lot of kinds of, this was I was out of town speaking like this, and my students were given an empty mask, and it was a drawing class, and they had to email me a photo of themselves. And I conducted this and posted them on the wiki and made comments all day long from 5,000 miles away. Another thing that I do is I'll ask them to give a project proposal in an email with some images of other things that they saw. So this one says, I love old signs, so I want to lead the people on a tour of vintage signs of Greater LA. It was a virtual tour. And another one says, you told me to use Dropbox, but you didn't tell me how, but I figured it out. Here's the assignment. So just letting you know, using lots of different ways of transferring information, and again, understanding how form factors work across different projects. Online resources, there's a bunch. What I really recommend is you keep things to 5 fingers. Like my 5 go-to right now are, I use Wikispaces, Learnist, lynda.com, Post-its, and stickers. Notice there are 2 that you can buy at Office Depot and 3 that are online. These are really important things to do. Have any of you taken a knitting class or knitted or done a collage? You kind of clear out a spot, you get your yarn ready, you buy the right needles, you look through all the things. It's the same as what you do if you pick out a good recipe. You organize yourself around a project. So pick the right things. So what I did is another class I was teaching, I have all of my students do video too. They can do video chats, they can create videos, do all kinds of videos. And so in this video, this project was to do one of the 7 deadly sins in animation. And it was for a Halloween project. So it was posted on Vimeo. Again, I wasn't there, but you had to go look at you only had to look at 3 sites. Again, let me read this comment. I think that maybe at the end, around 10 seconds, the girl should be off to the center a bit. Also make use of the stage. It feels even though she is the center of attention, it feels like she's caged in a circle. But if you could make the circle bigger and move her off to the side, well, it goes on and on and on. Do you understand? You don't get that kind of feedback in class in front of everybody else. He wrote back, thanks for that information. I changed the soundtrack. Somebody gave another suggestion for a soundtrack. And this went on all without me being there while I was in New York speaking at Columbia. So this was the group helping each other improve their projects. This is what happens when we really start teaching them how to understand the way they learn and to use the resources available for them in a constructive and positive way. Another thing I do is I do a YouTube You Teach assignment. I give absolutely no instruction. My students all subscribe and have lynda.com available in their labs, and you may too at Northridge next fall if you're And what they do is they are given a link to YouTube, they're given a link to iMovie. I know they all have video because they have the smartphone. I've already done the digital survey at the beginning of the semester, but I give them the option to check things out from school as well, and they have to go teach something. So I'm going to show you what they do. They've got 5 days to do a 5-minute video that teaches somebody something. Sorry, that's what happens when you're nervous. Yeah, there we go. So this is when I became the amazing teacher. Not because of this video, I'll tell you why in a sec. So this student came up with a very clever way of teaching people how to make spaghetti sauce. And he's very, very shy, and he's an introvert, and he didn't want to ever have his face on camera. So he came up with the idea of drawing the cue cards and putting the camera very close to his hands. He had never made a video in his entire life. And I'm going to stop it right now. But the important part was that he sent me an email and he said, after 2 days, I had 200 views. In my whole life, 20 years of going to school, there has never been 200 people that looked at anything that I have done. So do not disavow the fact that this is powerful, powerful tools that we can change the way they think about the world. That's when I knew I was an amazing teacher. He said, "You're an amazing teacher. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." Another thing I do is I do use a lot of online video learning. I use lynda.com, but I use any other resources. I pirate, pillage, and borrow from everybody. I don't mind. I really don't, and I give credit for all of it. But what I like to do is that I think of the online video as sort of being the space between me and face-to-face. I'm teaching them how to do on their own learning, and video is great for that because you can watch it as many times as you want without fail, without shame, anytime you want. I've watched my students use lynda.com, and their typical time of using it is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. because they go to school, they have jobs, they join clubs, and oh, lo and behold, they fall in love. They didn't really plan on that this semester, but it's now in there. So they have very big lives, and when they add it all up, it's like 26 hours a day, not 24 hours. So they often are not sitting down to that quiet time until 10 p.m. The second thing I realized is that I was watching them. I went around the labs, and I thought, I'm assigning these videos from TEDx conferences and lynda.com, and I don't feel like anyone's watching it. So if I'm flipping the classroom and I come in and no one's watched the video, what are we going to talk about? Like, this is my great fear, right? So I walked around and noticed that their desks were just a mess. And I figured it was like my daughter's dorm room at Northwestern, which is literally a foot of clothing that you sort of just drag your way through. Because their idea is don't do laundry until everything is dirty. Laundry seems to be a very difficult task for college students. The last thing they'll choose to do, except when they're studying for finals. Then they'll go back to do that. And I thought, these desktops I'm looking at remind me of my daughter's dorm room at Northwestern. And I started teaching people. I now do a 15-minute demo on how to set up your desk to learn. I say, put your table of contents, your to-do list on the left-hand side, put the things that you're learning from in the middle, and put your teacher's notes and your project on the right. One of my students came back and said, "Oh my God, this is so much easier. I can make the project, watch the videos, and do what you asked me to do because I'm seeing your notes, my notes, and the project." Thanked me a million times. This seems like it's dumb that I would have to teach this, but it was a big epiphany. Actually teaching people how to use their desktops to learn. The second thing I do is I do a lot of time management. And one of the things I do now is when I'm giving a project, sometimes I find students are very visual. And I'll explain how this one works. So they're supposed to brainstorm. This is a class where they have to give an idea for an iPad prototype, a proof of concept that they're going to pitch to an angel venture capitalist group, which we have at Pasadena. Notice it says 20 minutes for brainstorming. Why do I make it so short? If it's forever, they never get to it. If it's 20 minutes, they're hysterical. Oh my God, it's like that in the room. 20 minutes to college students makes them really hustle. Then whenever there's a diamond, that's a choice. Have I done did we get to the brainstorming? Should I go get feedback from Laurie? Should I get feedback from the task required and how to be very focused, because I wasn't giving them 2 days and 3 days and 2 weeks later I'll see you. This all happened in one class period, including going out to Starbucks with paper cards and having people look at your cards and saying, that's a stinky idea for an iPad app, I don't use it, and then going back through the thing. And some of them went through this cycle 4 or 5 times, over 4 or 5 days. The idea here is teaching iterative prototyping, which is no different than scientific research, which is no different than editing a draft in English. What I hope that you get the message today is you guys are all subject matter experts. To get the jobs that you have at this valuable institution, you also had some very critical and strategic thinking skills that made you differentiate from every other candidate for that job. Teach your students those skills. Your skills for success, as combined with subject matter expertise, will make you the best teacher they ever had. Because you don't need a 15-week course in how to do time management. You just have to understand what it takes to do time management. You don't have to do a 15-week course in project management. You just have to explain why it helps make you better. Why did the executives plus the executive assistants do better on the project? So this is all about execution and strategy and processes, combined with subject matter expertise, a passion, a love, a 10,000 hours, a practicing every day what you love to do and want to swim in. So they do wireframes, that's an example. Another thing we do, this is an example of a brainstorm. We were brainstorming what an e-portfolio site would look like in WordPress. This was everybody. I don't use electronic whiteboards, because why? I have my smartphones. So everybody gets their smartphone out. This is our shot with the smartphone. Click. Guess how much this cost in my school to put up this? This board already was in the classroom. 90% of them are in the classrooms at PCC. Everybody had their smartphone. Instead of buying a $2,000 smartboard, $0. My favorite. My favorite. We use it every day in class. Took the pictures of it, and then I said, now your assignment, because they're used to these challenges now, is to take this photo that you just took of our brainstorming session and turn it into a deliverable in Keynote. That's what they came up with. I'd hire that person. I would hire that person to take the ideas that we had in a cross-divisional, cross-team setting and turn that into a deliverable that could be the beginning of a project brief. I would hire that person in a flash. Do I see those kinds of portfolio out in business? No. This is what I'm talking. You guys all have those skills. Teach them to your students. And then finally, I think it's important to have people exceed expectations. And first time I taught at LA Valley, and somebody said, you know, you're a really hard teacher, but you don't tell them day one that you're expecting them to exceed your expectations. If you did, you'd get much better reviews at the end of semester. So I took that piece of advice and I said, I'm a really hard teacher. I have high hopes for all of you, and I'm letting you know, right, that just normal won't be my normal. I want a new normal. I want a much higher normal. So now when we do this, I actually draw a picture of what it takes to go to Mount Everest. And I bet you know that no one's ever gone to Mount Everest alone, ever. It's the highest mountain in the world, and no one's done it alone. It actually takes about 60 to 80 people to do a successful trip to Mount Everest. It takes 3 years of preparation and 5 years of petitioning for the permits and getting the funding to do it. It's not an easy thing. So when this get rich, get smart quick, get money from Las Vegas in 4 hours or less culture, teaching people what it really takes to exceed expectations is a very valuable idea. And we talk about where the hard spots are going to be in the course, and we graph the ascent of the course. So this is an assignment in JavaScript, and JavaScript's not easy because it's a language, and I teach it as though it's a foreign language class. This is a project from lynda.com, and it teaches how to do marquee sliders. I'm sure you've all seen them. Pottery Barn has them. Every website, Target has them. And images slide by. But in our class, I said to them, they all did the assignment because it's a project-based course in lynda.com. And I said, in some schools, that would be enough just to copy what Chris had done, but I really want you to exceed my expectations. And they said, why? I said, well, why would we use this form factor? Why would we use a slider with JavaScript? Somebody said, well, maybe we could use it for a timeline. Somebody said, well, maybe for a panorama. Maybe for a storyboard for a project idea. Maybe to tell a story. Maybe to put different points of view of the same product. Show the front, side, back. So I want to take just a moment to show you what they did. So this student, after we made that list of the different ways you could use a slider, said, I'm going to choose point of view. And what he did is he took a spatial point of view. He moved in closer and closer and closer and back and forth in the museum. And as you can see, you discover the museum wall with him. As you start backwards. You start this way and you move away from the wall, and you move away from the wall, and you move away from the wall, and the wall reveals what it is. Would you want to click on that? Of course you'd want to click on that. Look, I want to click on that. I've seen it 100 times. So that was one student. The other student decided to tell a story. Her backstory, which is down here at the bottom, is that her cousin had been born with an ear defect. And when he was 22 years old, because of what they know about hearing, he had an cochlear implant. And she had heard his stories over and over again, so she used the idea of a panorama. She is from Mongolia, so she understands Chinese scrolls. And we talked about Chinese scrolls being the first form of interactivity. It's no different than a browser window, right? Browser window scrolls, a Chinese scroll scrolls. She loved that idea, so she decided to modernize that idea, and she has a continuous drawing that you can move through that shows the ocular implant going into her cousin's ears and giving her new hope for the future. But it's fun is that you can go through it at different speeds depending on what you do, and it tells a story with text. So this is the richest of experiences that we can possibly have. Another student decided to do a walk through a garden, and she was enchanted with the Huntington Library. So she took a number of pictures and she went back into Photoshop, and this is 17 layers of images moving in Canvas HTML5 and CSS3 with JavaScript. And what you have is a walk through the garden, a virtual field trip. These projects exceed expectations. These projects aren't just doing a tutorial. Like, as I say to them, they said, well, what do you mean by just doing a tutorial? I said, when I go to knitting class and I make a rectangle, I tell everyone I've made a scarf. I have done nothing. I want you to know I have done nothing. I know nothing. It just has imitated what the teacher told me to do in class. If I come home and invent something and make a hat or make a sweater or do something new with that, I have exceeded the expectations. I've taken the knowledge that was given me, chewed it up for myself, and put it out there to solve a different problem in a different context. So this transferring knowledge to new contexts is very, very important. So I'm almost done, and this is the last one I'm going to go through a little bit. I use rubrics all the time, and I borrow rubrics. But one of the things that you'll see on this rubric is that I think we have to really emphasize digital literacy. Now, everybody understands visual literacy because we've become a very visual crowd with the internet. But it's important to teach our students what information literacy is and computer literacy. Information literacy means understanding what we're accessing and whether it has value academically and rigorously to the research at hand. You know, I can put in the word gem and get to a gem magazine and buy rings. Or I can put in gems and find rocks from the moon. So we have to start really teaching what information literacy is. And computer literacy, for me, we're going to drop that word computer, and it's just really what is our digital tool set? What do we want for them to have that first day of school or that first day of job? So what I did with my students is I actually took a bunch of art students and did a lesson on Excel spreadsheets. Never been done before. And none of them had ever used Excel to generate a function or a formula to create a bubble graph. And then we took those bubbles and and then they had to go primary research. The number one hard part of this thing was to find primary research. They kept finding PDFs that were written about surveys or written about collected data, but they didn't get to that ugly spreadsheet part, which is the original raw data. Once they got that idea, they were beginning to understand information literacy. And they took that data with that Excel spreadsheet formula I taught them, and they made visual graphics that are proportional to those things. This student right here ended up getting accepted to an art exhibit at the Pasadena, California Museum of Art, as well as he just got a full scholarship to CCA up in San Francisco. It is because of this intelligent design, not just being a person who makes pretty things, but be an intelligent designer of your own fate is one of our mottos in the class. So I want to switch gears. I hope I've kind of inspired you, but I also want to talk a little bit about the lynda.com library because I know you all have access to it. And I've talked about the difficulty of going into the library online because you don't know what's there. So there's something that is at the bottom of every single page of the Lynda library, which is called the Fat Footer. And if you haven't been there, I want you to go there. Because this is your floor plan to the library. These are the 10 stacked floors. These are the things that you can learn there. No one goes into a library and says, I want an Autodesk version 3 of blah, 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 AutoCAD. No one does that. What you say is, I want to learn character rigging, or I want to learn how to do video, or I want to learn a business skill, how to be better at interviewing people. And so what I do is I go in here and show people these different ideas. And I've never ever gone in here and not had someone say, I'd like to learn that. So I'm going to show you, like, if you go to business skills right now, I didn't even know lynda.com had business skills. And then I see that there's all these different kinds of courses, and they give me recommendations of the most popular ones, and I can see all kinds of things that I might be able to use with a team here in the HR or for professional development here at Northridge. So right off the bat, I've got all these, and none of these courses are more than an hour long. So I can give these to my students to help them get ready to make that transition as well. The other thing is where's that Fat Footer? Yay, it's at the bottom of every single page, you guys. The bonuses, the Fat Footer is at the bottom of every page. I told the UX team, I said, did you do that for me? And they said, no, we did it just simply for SEO purposes. If we have the words on every single page, people find things. Well, I'm telling you, it's been my lifesaver with teachers teaching them how to use the Lynda library. You can't get lost if you always have a map at the bottom of every page. So this is a good thing. The second thing that's really interesting about this is that it says, do you want to see most viewed courses? Of course I want to see most viewed courses. So what's interesting about most viewed courses, remember I teach web design, is I looked at this and I said, okay, there's 1 million people watching lynda.com every day. In March, they had 10 million views of movies. That's 144 million views. I could probably use this live data that changes every 24 hours to do a better job of figuring out what tool set and what objectives I should be teaching my students. Because who's ever watching these is trying to get employed or stay employed. And what I realized is that the developer top 5 and the web top 5 were the same. So what did that help me as a teacher know? That for my students to go out and be web designers, that they needed to have the same toolbox, but some would be more on the visual end and some would be more on the coding end, and they needed to find their spot on the spectrum. And guess what? Everybody in the room eased up. Because now it wasn't about being one all or one everything. It was just knowing where you fit in that spectrum. Maybe I'll be the PHP database guy. Maybe I'll be the JavaScript guy. Maybe I'll be the content management person. Maybe I'll be the guy that gets it put into R&D and has to figure out how to use Canvas and processing and things like that. All of a sudden, by having a landscape, and I fit on that landscape in the spectrum, using spectrum as a way to help your students identify location, makes it so much easier. And guess what? They find the courses they need on lynda.com. You find the courses you need to be teaching them and the tool sets that you need to be teaching it. I use it every day. It's free. It's free even if you're not a member. It's always up there. It's always up there because it's on the Fat Footer. Okay, going back, a couple other things, and then I'll open up for questions. The other thing about the Fat Footer, it's got everything you want to do. If you want to become an author, call for trainers, Fat Footer. I hope some of you decide to be authors. I'm one. You want to find out about mobile access and what we support? On there. That's where you get the download for the app. You want FAQs, you got problems, got content management issues, you want to see anything, everything's in the Fat Footer. Don't go anywhere, nothing to memorize, nothing to write down. Second thing, a couple new things. We have playlists and a course history. I use the course history all the time. It shows me what I'm doing and what I'm actively doing, and I use that visual bar. It's very infographic-like. But I do want to talk about playlists. So playlist has just been upgraded. Have any of you used playlist? It was called Queues. I fought hard. It's now called playlists. If you fight hard, if you go to 80 schools and you're really loud and whiny like me and you have your cockroach moments, guess what, guys? You can affect change at lynda.com. So be sure and give me your feedback either in email or today, and I will go back and say, everyone on Northridge needs, they don't like, and change this. Well, no, Q's works great in England, but let's face it, what do we all want it to be like? Facebook, Google, and Amazon. If it already works in those three spaces, we don't go out and take our stop signs and make them green just because we want to be environmentally correct. It just doesn't work that way. So one of the things we're looking for is standardization of library search, find, rescue things. So the first thing you do is you create one, and it's going to show up right on that home page, or you can go to your account settings and set it up. So because in two different places. We're trying to make it more contextual, or if you're on a table of contents, you have an option to create a playlist there. And then you just start saying, this is my favorite, dump it into this folder, dump it into this folder. Once you've got your playlist, now there's a share button on that folder, and you can send an email to yourself. And I usually send an email to myself because I don't like the wording of the lynda.com one. And I say, this is for this week's assignment, you should watch da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And when they click on that link, they get this. This is beauty. This is beauty for all of us. Because now we have a way to do project resources, the toolbox. We have a way to do on your own learning, beautiful. We have a way to keep a record of what was helpful for us in developing a course, or in helping a group of teachers or instructors solve a problem on campus. And then finally, I do something really, really stupidly simple and dumb. This goes back to the knitting class. If it's a rectangle, it's a scarf. I take a screenshot of my playlist, and in Adobe PDF, I make a rectangle, and I move it up and down every Sunday. And you know those poor students who get that announcement at 11 p.m.? I move that little rectangle up and down every week and say, if you really want to do well in the lab, you'll watch these before you come in on Tuesday. And I just move that up and down all semester long, circling the things that you should watch. One PDF screenshot and one little bar. Send it out in an email. I do it when I'm doing workshops, when I'm doing textbook replacement, and even when I'm just doing short-term turnaround projects. This is an example of a much richer one. I can help you. You should invite me back. I'm free to you. If you have Lynda Campus, you get me. Lucky you. I'll sit and work with teams in creating division playlists that you can post on your division things or for your teams, and thinking about how you want to use that across teams. Not every teacher is going to adopt things the same way, so having shared resources that everyone can share and see makes it a collaborative way without changing the way we autonomously teach in the classroom. I just came out with a class called Teaching with the iPad, and the first part is about setting up the iPad classroom. It came out last Wednesday, and today I'd like to announce the second one, which is creating your first research project. So if you go out there, it's a really, I didn't know if it was going to be a great class, but it is a good class. I was watching it. I was better than I thought. It goes through everything. If you're a teacher with one iPad in the classroom, all the way to a whole school doing an iPad initiative. I go through Apple Configurator, no good resources. I made you a PDF you can download, check, 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 check. I talk about all the tools, how to get things in and off the iPad. And then finally, the class that just opened today, and I want to show you this if you don't know this. If I type in the word iPad, take 2 breaths, it gives me a suggestion of everything that has iPad. Now, this way the search works up here is it searches titles and the short descriptions. That's it. So put simple things up there, not complex things. And as you can see, creating a classroom project. And in this project, I actually talk about how to do a research project using only the iPad and how to post it to the wiki and how to use it as a presentation tool in class. So that's all available for you. I also did a couple of you asking me questions, and I want to go through a couple of those before I do sneak peeks. Yes, there's Visual Studio. Yes, there's Visual Basics, Bootstrap, Reaper 4, all coming out in the next 2 months. There's going to be an advanced class in PHP in July. There's going to be a class PHP Code Igniter. Articulate is coming out at the end of June. The Windows iPhone SDK class is coming out. MATLAB, where's the MATLAB group? June 12th, I found it for you. And Revit for any of you in Autodesk. Those were some of the things you guys asked me about this morning, and I found out for you. And Moodle, are you guys on Moodle campus? Moodle's coming out 2.4 in about two months. There, I hope see, squeaky wheel, has to be perfect. Okay, sneak peeks. The Teaching with the iPad class, there's going to be more Moodle, Blackboard, and Canvas. And let me explain how things that are not boxed products work. We have made a commitment that every business quarter, that means every 3 months, that if there's any new features, we swap out the old movies, put in the new movies. If there's a complete GUI, or what we call the graphic interface design, then we redo the entire course. That way, there's no course ever out of date more than 12 weeks. You guys happy? Happy? Now you understand how it works. However, if you're using WordPress like I was, and they did a major change of WordPress in October in the middle of my semester, that did wreak havoc with me because why? They got rid of 2 movies and added 3. And my students kept saying, I can't find this movie you told me to go take. So I'm warning you, it works 2 ways. Computer literacy, there's a course called Computer Literacy for Mac and Windows. I highly recommend that any freshman watches that. It has self-correcting tests like you do for getting your driver's ed thing. And what I tell my students to do the first day of class is take all the quizzes first. If you don't get 100% on the quiz, then you owe me a movie on lynda.com. We're going to have sub-admin accounts for Lynda Campus, so now you can have not just one administrator for your Lynda Campus, you can have groups. We're going to have shared playlist reports. That's like book club record of the year. We have a book club. I've been in a book club for 11 years, and finally we made somebody be the book club scribe to keep track of what we were reading. Now if you do a shared playlist, you'll be able to share how you're doing, what you're watching. You'll be able to see that course history and see how that group's doing. So let's say you've been a very good looker because you nod at everything I say. Let's say your team has to learn SharePoint in 3 months. You can share a playlist about what you need to know for SharePoint. You can put the 2 or 3 SharePoint classes we have and a couple other things that might help them. And then with the shared playlist, Evil Genius you've now become, I noticed, Ted, you've only watched 1 movie. It's almost to the 3 months when we're going to convert from this to this. So it's great for doing conversion changes to have the shared playlist. So if you're doing a conversion on your campus from one system to the next, from Microsoft this to Microsoft that, shared playlist, Evil Genius. I'm sorry, I noticed that we're going to be our drop-dead date on this is how it works. It's really, really good. And then responsive player in beta. And the responsive player in beta means that it expands to the size of the device you're using. Are you all watching things on double speed? I can tell by your blank looks you are not. Okay. This is my last demo, and then I'll open up for questions if there's time. I teach my students to watch everything. Let's watch mine. So I'm going to do the welcome movie. And what it's going to do is say, do you want to start using the new player? Now, there are 3 places you can choose the player you want. Why do I choose this player? Closed captioning, number 1. Double speed, number 2. And 3, it's responsive. It works across all types of devices. So my Android students all watch with the browser and not with the app. And in fact, this is a hot tip, write this down, m.lynda.com is the mobile site, and it is 1/3 lighter than waiting. Some of you said you were having problems with getting the whole site to come down. Want to have a much faster viewing experience? Do m.lynda.com. So cool, so much faster. And the search engine is contextual, meaning if you put in a word, it finds relevance to the subject matter. So I'm going to start using the new player. And hopefully I've got a pretty good internet connection.
Hi, I'm Laurie Burress, and welcome to Creating a Classroom Research Project, part of the Teaching with the iPad series here on lynda.com. In order to integrate technology into your curriculum, you need to keep the tools in mind at the beginning. Once you've set up your iPad classroom, as we talked about in the setting up.
Now, you'll probably notice there's no closed captioning on that one. We post the course right as soon as it's done. Then we send at the same time it out to the transcriptor. And that will take 4 weeks for it to show. All courses will have transcripts. All courses will. Some of my students love the transcripts because they can go to, and you guys will like them too. I am a fast word searcher. So is Linda Wyman, but her husband's visual. Some of us are more text and some of us are more visual. So if I've already watched the movie a couple times, I might scan the transcript to find where I want to be. The transcript works for me like an index of the movies. So I can use it like the index at a box back of the books because I can do a word search. The other thing is that if I listen at it twice as fast, what does that mean? A 3-hour course just only became an hour and a half. I can do it on my lunch hour. All my students, once you do this, in fact, I had a bunch of students visiting lynda.com, and they go, Chris Converse is here. I go, yeah. I said, but he's talking normal. I said, I know his voice on 3 different speeds. I know him normal, double speed, and triple speed. And for me, they're all the same. You know, I know my mom's angry voice, I know my mom's happy voice, and I know my mom's sad voice. So you get what I'm saying? The reason I got into doing the double speed is I was with a bunch of people that had learning disabilities, and they were all doing it with the screen reader functionality. And after 3 days, I could understand what they were listening to, and I thought, well, this is fabulous, because we scan websites all the time, right, for text. We've learned to scan textbooks. We don't read Gardner's History of the Art word by word. So by having the ability to auditorially scan the movies lets my students get the big idea round one and then go back granularly or discreetly to do the things that are the hard things to do. Does that help you? It should make your whole life at lynda.com. Between fat footer and double speed, I've given you, those are $100 tips and tricks. So let me get back in there. I just want to finish off with a little bit more of Laurie Burress gooey inspiration. You know what, teachers? Be the mentor, teach the big ideas, communicate, collaborate, teach them how you got to be what you are today. Every one of you are here successfully working at a wonderful academic institution that's known the world over, even if San Jose is being in the news for all the wrong reasons. You guys do great things at this university for people in public education. Everybody looks to see what California's doing. Teach them what you learned to get here. Challenge your students. Make it an A or an F. Say you either get this or you don't. You either experiment, fail, and get feedback, or you won't get hired. And you know what happens? What your students will come back and say to you? I discovered something I love in this class. I think I'm passionate about this. I think I figured out where I learn best, on my bed with a drawing board with a lamp. I can share my ideas confidently, written or visually or in writing. I can do this. Even if I don't get the right teachers or everything is hunky-dory, I can figure this on because I have the right tools and the knowledge of how to do research. So there's no single answer out that. Remember, for you, it's just the same. You could be in the classroom, or you could do everything online in a MOOC. And I imagine most of you are not going to be at this end or this end. You're going to find your spot somewhere on that spectrum. Go back and keep using spectrum as a way to get out of the feeling of feeling overwhelmed and go back to finding your position. All you have to do to be an effective person is come in knowing in your gut that you're in the right place at the right time, doing the thing you do best in the most authentic way. That's finding your position. I'm sorry to say I had to go through 5 years of therapy after I divorced my husband to find that position. But he said to me, and I'm going to say it to you, you cannot get what you want if you don't know what you want. So this is where you start, is finding that position. This is an app you can download. There is an app for this. It records all the mouse moves that you make in a day. So one of the producers at lynda.com was a student before he became a producer, and this is the image that his mouse movements made for that day. And lest you think I let you go without a rubric, because I love my rubrics. I hate those SLOs, but love my rubrics. I want you to think of a new way of thinking about talking. This is my Bloom's taxonomy. This is the Laurie Burress taxonomy. Make it about make your students be about belonging, have power, freedom, and fun. Make it fun again. Real, you know, in the sandbox, when you go in a kindergarten room, you have squeals of delight. That day we all put on stupid t-shirts and made fools of ourselves. There was squeals of delight. Get that delight back in there. And you should be the caring person. You're connected. You're not alone on this endeavor. I'm right here beside you and at your back. I did not write that. That's from The Network by Alan Sorkin. But it's such a good line. I'm right here behind you and at your side. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Listen, encourage, laugh, and you know what they're going to end up with? Something they love, something they're competent in, something they feel responsible for, and a joy in lifelong learning. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Have I passed my time limit? Do you have?
We're close. We've got time for a quick 1 or 2 questions.
I will stay as long as anyone has a question or a gripe. And Howard will too. Howard's at the back. Howard is your Learning Solutions support person. And if you want to contact him as well, And just to help you know, I'm very easy to find. I'm Laurie at lynda.com. Although by the end of every day, everybody calls me Linda because there's too much alliteration there. Any questions? Anything I can help you with? I know it's the afternoon and after lunch. What a hard spot you put me in, Ben. Yes?
Yeah, that's just a quick question. I'm taking a couple courses on Lynda.com. I guess you next coming more available students. I guess maybe on this campus.
You're making a decision next week, and I do not know what the decision is.
Okay, well, my thing was, you know, once you view a class, you get a certificate of completion, etc. I mean, I could do that probably 20 times on the course. So are there any plans that offer any certification after courses?
We really don't have courses that what I call I don't think there's any desire in the Lynda company that I see on the roadmap for the next 3 years of being a certificated networking for Microsoft networking or something, or like Oracle. What they are thinking about is having, any of you do open processing or processing, having places where you can have these shared group playlists with shared group examples, what we call shared portfolios. So that part of your account now will be showing examples of what you did with the learning and projects. That's going to be there. We're doing challenges in courses. So if you take the course on processing at the end of every chapter, or you take the course on After Effects, these are beta tests that we're doing on, those are 2 courses I can think of, where there's a challenge that your students could do, and it's a time challenge. You've got an hour to do X. And there's not a solution. Then you come back to the second movie, and the movie shows you different examples. The teacher shows 3 examples that he came up with, or an example and his 2 friends came up with. And it's to encourage dialogue and show that there could be an infinite number of solutions and an infinite number of pathways to the truth. That, you know, the way we get to something is highly individualistic. That's going to be part there. We're going to be adding lots of languages because they just bought video to brain. So I know one of the reasons I have closed captioning on for my students, seeing it, hearing it, doing it, 1, 2, 3, see, hear, do. We agreed that to do the JavaScript class, we had to watch each one of those courses 3 times. And we like to do it in small bite-sized chunks. And we have discussions about, and what's great about it, for me, I use Lynda sort of as my virtual teaching assistant. Like one day they all came in and they go, that Chris Converse, he just sucks on this JavaScript project. And I was like, that wasn't my name, that was Chris Converse's name on lynda.com. but you see how we can have different points of view in the classroom and discuss, he was so good at teaching this, but he jumped so fast, I didn't understand. And as soon as I hear one person say, he jumped so fast, or I didn't understand, how many people do you think in the class didn't understand? Probably more than half of them. So that's a cue to me. Right now, I have them watch the lynda.com courses or other videos. I don't use just lynda.com. And in the first 15 minutes, not unlike math class, I'll say, can we talk about what you watched and what were the pain points and what were the good points? And if I hear any pain points, I stop and go through it. That means we can't go forward because it means people didn't get it. And I'm much more in touch with my class now about where they are. Does that make sense? I'm not just that baby bird, that chewing it up, and it was just dancing as fast as I could to get through content, wasn't really getting what we needed. That syllabus discussion, all painfully morbid at the beginning, actually gets everybody on. It's a team building exercise. Does that make sense? We've all agreed that this is what the expectations in 15 weeks are and what it will take inside and outside of class to get to those. It's not just a piece of paper. It's a commitment discussion with input and dialogue. And I found that when I do that, classes do much better. I've had for the last 2 semesters 85% completion of I haven't had any, dropping out, which is easy to do in community colleges, and 85% completion on assignments, which is very high in community college. I have done the iPad classroom all year long. Love it, love it, love it. All I can tell you, if you guys have an iPad initiative? Double speed, double speed. Why? Think about it. To use a mouse is sort of like, right? When you hand a student an iPad and you say da-da-da, they just start playing and they go, look what I did. Oh, look. And it's kinesthetic. It's like riding a bike or learning to draw a different way. And you don't give instructions on up, over, down, touch. Get what I'm saying? It's very kinesthetic, very different. Thank you all. Such a joy to be here.